Okay, this is book 3 of John Dryden's translation of the Aeneid. In this book, we're going to track the Trojans as they look for their new destined home. They'll be redirected by a ghost at one point, by Apollo, by Anchises, Aeneas' father, by the Penates, which are the household gods that Aeneas saved from Troy, and then by the prophet of Apollo towards the end. So this is book 3 of the Aeneid by Virgil, translated by John Dryden. When heaven had overturned the Trojan state, and Priam's throne by too severe a fate, when ruined Troy became the Grecians' prey, and Ilium's lofty towers in ashes lay, warned by celestial omens, we retreat to seek in foreign lands a happier seat. Near old Intandros and at Ida's foot, the timber of the sacred groves we cut and build our fleet. So just to pause really quick, they're building their fleet. How long would it take an ancient people from about 1200 BC to build an entire fleet of ships? There is a lot of passage of time going on in book 3 in particular. Book 3 in Dryden's translation is 945 lines, but it's 7 years of happenings. So just keep that in mind, that a lot of time is passing, and there's a lot of woes even that he alludes to that are not specifically recounted. Picking back up. Uncertain yet to find what place the gods for our repose assigned, friends daily flock, and scarce the kindly spring began to clothe the ground and birds to sing, when old Anchises summoned all to see the crew my father and the fates obey. With sighs and tears I leave my native shore, and empty fields where Ilium stood before. My sire, my son, our less and greater gods, all sail at once and cleave the briny floods. Against our coast appears a spacious land, which once the fierce Lycurgus did command. Thracia the name, the people bold in war. Vast are their fields, and tillage is their care. A hospitable realm, while fate was kind, with Troy in friendship and religion joined. I land, with luckless omens, then adore their gods, and draw a line along the shore. I laid the deep foundations of a wall, and Aenos named from me the city call. To Dianean Venus vows are paid, and all the powers that rising labors aid. A bowl on Jove's imperial altar laid. Not far a rising hillock stood in view, sharp myrtles on the sides and cornels grew. There, while I went to crop the sylvan scenes and shade our altar with their leafy greens, I pulled a plant. With horror I relate a prodigy so strange and full of fate. The rooted fibers rose, and from the wound black bloody drops distilled upon the ground. Mute in amaze my hair with terror stood, fear shrunk my sinews and congealed my blood. Manned once again another plant I try, that other gush with the same sanguine dye. Then, fearing guilt for some offense unknown, with prayers and vows the Dryads I atone, with all the sisters of the woods, and most the god of arms who rules the Thracian coast, that they or he these omens could avert, release our fears, and better signs impart. Okay, so the Trojans set out from Troy. They go south to near Ida to build their fleet, and then when Anchises says it's time to go, and they can tell by fate, they leave. And so they sail off, and they try to find a new home in Thrace. In Thrace, they're excited, they offer to the gods, and then all of a sudden, Aeneas starts pulling out some plants to ornament and shade the altar with, and with horror, he sees that this blood comes out when he pulls the plants. And so freaks him out, as just imagine, okay, you're going to your garden and you pick at a nice tomato and then all of a sudden blood, right? Or you pick out your potatoes and blood. Okay, just, what in the world? And so he mans himself with courage, and he tries again, and the same thing happens. So he very quickly, all the gods he can think of, he tries to pray to them and appease them, because clearly something's not going correctly here. Line 50. Cleared as I thought, and fully fixed at length to learn the cause, I tugged with all my strength, I bent my knees against the ground, once more the violated myrtle ran with gore. Scarce dare I tell the sequel, From the womb of wounded earth and caverns of the tomb, a groan as of a troubled ghost renewed my fright, and then these dreadful words ensued. Why dost thou thus my buried body rend? O spare the corpse of thy unhappy friend! Spare to pollute thy pious hands with blood! The tears distil not from the wounded wood. But every drop this living tree contains is kindred blood, and ran in Trojan veins. O fly from this unhospitable shore, warned by my fate, for I am Polydore. Here loads of lances in my blood embrued, again shoot upward, by my blood renewed. My faltering tongue and shivering limbs declare my horror, and in bristles rose my hair. When Troy with Grecian arms was closely pent, old Priam, fearful of the war's event, this hapless Polydore to Thracia sent. Loaded with gold, he sent his darling. Polydore is Priam's youngest son. Far from noise and tumults and destructive war, committed to the faithless tyrant's care, who, when he saw the power of Troy decline, forsook the weaker with the strong to join, broke every bond of nature and of truth, and murdered for his wealth the royal youth. O sacred hunger of pernicious golds, what bands of faith can impious lucre hold? Now, when my soul had shaken off her fears, I call my father and the Trojan peers, relate the prodigies of heaven, require what he commands, and their advice desire. All vote to leave the exorable shore, polluted with the blood of Polydore. But ere we sail, his funeral rites prepare, then to his ghost a tomb and altars rear. In mournful pomp the matrons walk the round, with baleful cypress and blue fillets crowned, with eyes dejected and with hair unbound. Then bowls of tepid milk and blood we pour, and thrice invoke the soul of Polydore. Now when the raging storms no longer reign, but southern gales invite us to the main, we launch our vessels with a prosperous wind, and leave the cities and the shores behind. Okay, so Aeneas tries again, more blood gushes out, and so he is horrified because a ghost groans out of the ground, and he says, "Why are you bothering me? This is Polydore you are digging up. This is my blood that is rising to the surface here." And so then Aeneas recounts what happened. Priam sent his youngest son, Polydore, to Thrace to avoid the destruction, but Polydore was led by this faithless tyrant whose name is Polymestor of Thrace. And Polymestor, when Polydore shows up, he welcomes him at first, but then he hears about Troy's trouble, and he says, well, Polydore is loaded with cash, and so I'm going to kill him off, and I will take all of his money for myself. And he does, and so this is what happened to the unburied body of Polydore. So, right, Aeneas is kind of freaked out and disgusted, both because there's grossness happening, but also disgusted by the treatment of this royal youth. And so he tells the rest of the Trojans, they vote to leave that dreadful, that execrable shore, and they're going to go somewhere else because this is too much for them. And so they give Polydore a proper funeral, invoke his spirit, and then they set sail for somewhere new. Line 99. An island in the Aegean main appears, Neptune and watery Doris claim it theirs. It floated once till Phoebus fixed the sides to rooted earth, and now it braves the tides. Here, borne by friendly winds, we come ashore, with needful ease our weary limbs restore, and the sun's temple and his town adore. Aeneas, the priest and king, with laurel crowned, his hoary locks with purple fillets bound, who saw my sire the Delian shore ascend, came forth with eager haste to meet his friend, invites him to his palace, and in sign of ancient love their plighted hands they join. Then to the temple of the god I went, and thus before the shrine my vows present. Give, O Thymbrius, give a resting place to the sad relics of the Trojan race, a seat secure, a region of their own, a lasting empire and a happier town. Where shall we fix? Where shall our labors end? Whom shall we follow, and what fate attend? Let not my prayers a doubtful answer find, but in clear auguries unveil thy mind. Scarce had I said, he shook the holy ground, the laurels and the lofty hills around, and from the tripos rushed a bellowing sound. Prostrate we fell, confessed the present God, who gave this answer from his dark abode. Undaunted youths, go, seek that Mother Earth from which your ancestors derived their birth. The soil that sent you forth, her ancient race in her old bosom shall again embrace. Through the wide world the Aenean house shall reign, and children's children shall the crown sustain. Then Phoebus did our future fates disclose, a mighty tumult mixed with joy arose. All are concerned to know what place the god assigned, and where determined our abode. My father, long revolving in his mind the race and lineage of the Trojan kind, thus answered their demands. Ye princes, hear your pleasing fortune, and dispel your fear. The fruitful isle of Crete, well known to fame, sacred of old to Jove's imperial name, in the mid-ocean lies, with large command, and on its plains 100 cities stand. Another Ida rises there, and we from thence derive our Trojan ancestry. From thence, as is divulged by certain fame, to the Rhoetean shores old Teucrus came. There fixed, and there the seat of empire chose, ere Ilium and the Trojan towers arose. In humble vales they built their soft abodes, till Cybele, the mother of the gods, with tinkling cymbals charmed the Idaean woods. She secret rites and ceremonies taught, and to the yoke the savage lions brought. Let us the land which heaven appoints explore, appease the winds, and seek the Gnossian shore. If Jove assists the passage of our fleet, the third propitious dawn discovers Crete. Thus having said, the sacrifices laid on smoking altars to the gods he paid. A bull to Neptune an oblation due, another bull to bright Apollo slew, a milk-white ewe the western winds to please, and one coal-black to calm the stormy seas. Ere this, a flying rumor had been spread that fierce Idomeneus from Crete was fled, expelled, and exiled, that the coast was free from foreign or domestic enemy. We leave the Delian ports and put to sea, by Naxos famed for vintage make our way, then green Donysa pass, and sail in sight of Paros isle, with marble quarries white. We pass the scattered isles of Cyclades, that, scarce distinguished, seem to stud the seas. The shouts of sailors double near the shores, they stretch their canvas and they ply their oars. All hands aloft, for Crete, they cry, and swiftly through the foamy billows fly. Okay, so they find themselves on the island of Delos, the Delian shore. And there, it turns out, Anchises knows the king and priest there, whose name is Aeneas. And he goes, and then Aeneas inquires of Apollo, "Hey, Apollo, please tell us where we're going, what we're looking for." And immediately, the god presents himself and says, "Hey, you need to go to the land of your ancestors." And Anchises quickly says, "Hey, that's Crete. That is where our ancestors come from." And so they are excited, and they try to appease the gods. They sacrifice to a few of them. And then they set out to sea. They hear that it's more welcoming now because the king who was there has been exiled, and so they're excited. They go by these different islands. And the Cycladic cultures, remember, were the ones that kind of predated the Greeks, and so it's all of the tiny little islands that make up a lot of that area in Greece. And they're sailing for Crete, very excited to go to their homeland and establish a new Troy. Line 180. Full on the promised land at length we bore, with joy descending on the Cretan shore. With eager haste a rising town I frame, which from the Trojan Pergamus I name. The name itself was grateful. I exhort to found their houses and erect a fort. Our ships are hauled upon the yellow strand. The youth begin to till the labored land, and I myself new marriages promote, give laws, and dwellings I divide by lot. When rising vapors choke the wholesome air, and blasts of noisome winds corrupt the year. Again, this is a year they're spending here, a short time in the chapter, a long time in their lives. The trees devouring caterpillars burn, Parched was the grass, and blighted was the corn, nor escaped the beasts, for Sirius from on high with pestilential heat infects the sky. My men, some fall, the rest in fevers fry. Again my father bids me seek the shore of sacred Delos, and the god implore to learn what end of woes we might expect, and to what clime our weary course direct. It was night when every creature, void of cares, the common gift of balmy slumber shares. The statues of my gods, for such they seemed, those gods whom I from flaming Troy redeemed, before me stood, majestically bright, full in the beams of Phoebe's entering light. Then thus they spoke, and eased my troubled mind. What from the Delian god thou goest to find, he tells thee here, and sends us to relate. Those powers are we, companions of thy fate, who from the burning town by thee were brought, thy fortune followed, and thy safety wrought. Through seas and lands as we thy steps attend, so shall our care thy glorious race befriend. An ample realm for thee thy fates ordain, a town that o'er the conquered world shall reign. Thou mighty walls for mighty nations build, nor let thy weary mind to labours yield, but change thy seat, for not the Delian god, nor we, have given thee Crete for our abode. A land there is, Hesperia called of old, the soil is fruitful and the natives bold. The Oenotrians held it once, by later fame now called Italia from the leader's name. Iassus there and Dardanus were born, from thence we came and thither must return. Rise, and thy sire with these glad tidings greet. Search Italy, for Jove denies thee Crete. Astonished at their voices and their sight, nor were they dreams but visions of the night, I saw, I knew their faces and descried, in perfect view, their hair with fillets tied. I started from my couch. A clammy sweat on all my limbs and shivering body sate. To heaven I lift my hands with pious haste, and sacred incense in the flames I cast. Thus to the gods their perfect honours done, more cheerful to my good old sire I run, and tell the pleasing news. In little space he found his error of the double race, not as before he deemed derived from Crete, no more deluded by the doubtful seat, then said, O son, turmoiled in Trojan fate, such things as these Cassandra did relate. This day revives within my mind what she foretold of Troy renewed in Italy and Latian lands. But who could then have thought that Phrygian gods to Latium should be brought, or who believed what mad Cassandra taught? Now let us go where Phoebus leads the way. He said, and we with glad consent obey, forsake the seat, and leaving few behind, we spread our sails before the willing wind. Now from the sight of land our galleys move, with only seas around and skies above, when o'er our heads descends a burst of rain, and night with sable clouds involves the main. Ooh, okay, so bad portents ahead. So they're on Crete, they're excited, they arrive, and everything's going well. They're building up this town they're going to call Pergamus, and they are establishing laws. Aeneas is marrying people, they're building the town. Everything's going well, when all of a sudden, these vapors are choking the air. There's this horrible smelling, this noisome wind that's corrupting their entire year there. The trees are devoured by caterpillars. The grass is completely dead. The corn is not doing well. And the beasts are not escaping, because Sirius, this star god, was thought to bring these kinds of heat waves. And so that is infecting the soil. So in short, things are not going well. The livestock is not doing well, the air is not good, and the men are all either falling or just burning with fever. And so Anchises says, Aeneas, you gotta go back to Delos and see what's going on. You have to ask Apollo what's going on. And Aeneas falls asleep, and the Penates, his household gods, appear to him, and they say, hey, don't worry, everything's going to be fine, but you have to change seats. You have to change where you're building your new empire, because this is not the place that Jove nor anybody, Apollo, or we have given you. Where you're supposed to go is Hesperia, this ancient name for Italy. And if you go there, that's where we came from, that's where your ancestors came from, and that's where you need to go. And so Aeneas wakes up and says, oh, and he knew it was a vision, it wasn't just an ordinary dream. And so he quickly throws incense in the fire to propitiate the gods, and then he runs to tell his dad, Dad, we gotta go to Italy. It's not Crete. And he goes, oh my goodness, you know what I just remembered? Cassandra said this. Remember, Cassandra was destined to tell the truth, to know what was going to happen, and then that nobody would listen to her. And so Cassandra said we would come to Italy. I can't believe I didn't remember that, but, I mean, she was crazy. How was I supposed to believe her anyway? And so they make their way from Crete, and they're going to sail toward Italy. And at the very end, we have this rain and these black clouds that are welcoming them further on their journey. So let's continue, line 258. The ruffling winds, the foamy billows raise, the scattered fleet is forced to several ways, the face of heaven is ravished from our eyes, and in redoubled peals the roaring thunder flies. Cast from our course, we wander in the dark, no stars to guide, no point of land to mark. Even Palinurus, no distinction found betwixt the night and day. Such darkness reigned around, 3 starless nights the doubtful navy strays, without distinction in 3 sunless days. The 4th renews the light, and from our shrouds we view a rising land like distant clouds. The mountain tops confirm the pleasing sight, in curling smoke ascending from their height. The canvas falls, their oars the sailors ply, from the rude strokes the whirling waters fly. At length I land upon the Strophides, safe from the danger of the stormy seas. Those isles are compassed by the Ionian main, the dire abode where the foul Harpies reign, forced by the winged warriors to repair to their old homes, and leave their costly fare. Monsters more fierce offended heaven ne'er sent from hell's abyss for human punishment, with virgin faces, but with wombs obscene, foul paunches, and with ordure still unclean, with claws for hands and looks forever lean. Okay, so they go. It's black for 3 days straight. They can't see anything. Palinurus, which is kind of the pilot of the ship, can't tell what's what, and he would be the most skilled at knowing where they're going, navigating by the stars, and so on. And then the 4th day, they finally are able to see, and they land on the Strophides, which is where the Harpies are. And he describes what the Harpies are like, and boy, it's just disgusting. Heaven has never sent something so foul to punish humans. They have the face of a woman, but their abdomen is grotesque. They have these foul paunches, which are protruding stomachs, so these huge stomachs, and just disgusting. And with ordure, and that's a name for dung. So just filth. They're filthy, and they smell awful. They're these grotesque creatures. Typically, we think of them as heads of a woman and then body of a bird. So that's what they have, claws for hands. And yeah, 285. We landed at the port and soon beheld fat herds of oxen graze the flowery fields, and wanton goats without a keeper strayed. With weapons we the welcome prey invade, then call the gods for partners of our feast, and Jove himself, the chief invited guest. We spread the tables on the greensward ground, we feed with hunger, and the bowls go round. When from the mountain tops with hideous cry and clattering wings the hungry harpies fly, they snatch the meat, defiling all they find, and parting leave a loathsome stench behind. Close by a hollow rock again we sit, new dressed to dinner, and the beds refit, secure from sight beneath a pleasing shade, where tufted trees a native arbor made. Again the holy fires on altars burn, and once again the ravenous birds return, or from the dark recesses where they lie, or from another quarter of the sky, with filthy claws their odious meal repeat, and mix their loathsome ordures with their meat. I bid my friends for vengeance then prepare, and with the hellish nation wage the war. They as commanded for the fight provide, and in the grass their glittering weapons hide. Then when along the crooked shore we hear their clattering wings and saw the foes appear, Maecenas sounds a charge. We take the alarm, and our strong hands with swords and bucklers arm. In this new kind of combat all employ their utmost force, the monsters to destroy. In vain. The faded skin is proof to wounds, and from their plumes and shining swords rebound. At length rebuffed, they leave their mangled prey, and their stretched pinions to the skies display. Yet one remained, the messenger of fate. High on a craggy cliff, Selene sate, and thus her dismal errand did relate. What! Not contented with our oxen slain, dare you with heaven an impious war maintain, and drive the Harpies from their native reign? Heed therefore what I say, and keep in mind what Jove decrees, what Phoebus has designed. And I, the Furies' queen, from both relate, you seek the Italian shores foredoomed by fate. The Italian shores are granted you to find, and a safe passage to the port assigned. But know that ere your promised walls you build, my curses shall severely be fulfilled. Fierce famine is your lot for this misdeed, reduced to grind the plates on which you feed. She said, and to the neighboring forest flew. Our courage fails us, and our fears renew. Hopeless to win by war, to prayers we fall, and on the offended Harpies humbly call. And whether gods or birds obscene they were, our vows for pardon and for peace prefer. But old Anchises, offering sacrifice and lifting up to heaven his hands and eyes, adored the greater gods. Avert, said he, these omens, render vain this prophecy, and from the impending curse a pious people free. Thus having said, he bids us put to sea. We loose from shore our hawsers and obey, and soon with swelling sails pursue the watery way. So another stop and another fail for the Trojans. They end up at this land of the Harpies, as we know, and they quickly see all of these oxen that are feeding on the fields and the goats that are free. They're wanton here means free, and they don't have any obvious owners. And so, yes, they finally have a place to rest, and they're going to eat this meal of oxen and goat when all of a sudden they hear the foul cry of the Harpies, and the Harpies see them eating, and they come with their talons of birds, and they smell awful. They're getting their ordure everywhere, their filth, right? It's just desecrating the meal, so they can't eat the food anymore. The Trojans move. They try to get somewhere where the Harpies can't see them, and they think they're successful, when all of a sudden, out of somewhere, the Harpies come again. And so Aeneas gets tired of it very quickly and says, all right, men, grab your swords and your bucklers, your shields, and we're going to fight these foul beasts. And so Maecenas, the trumpeter, sounds the charge, and they try to kill the Harpies, but it's useless. Their skin is foolproof to wounds. They can't be killed by the sword. And so they aren't killed, but they are kind of fought off. And so most of the Harpies leave, but Selene stays behind and says, hey, why are you stealing our oxen? Those are ours, and how dare you? And so for this misdeed, you stole our animals, and then you tried to kill us. And so, we don't have any power to keep you from your destined home in Italy, but I will tell you what. In 335 and 336, fierce famine is your lot for this misdeed. You will have fierce famine, and you will be reduced to grind the plates on which you feed. So you're going to be so hungry before you finally establish your destined town that you'll eat your very plates. And then she flies off. And everyone is really discouraged by this. Aeneas and everybody else prays, and whatever the Harpies are, whether they're gods or not, hey, please come back, we're really sorry, and the Harpies won't. And then Anchises says, guys, stop. I'm just going to pray to the gods, and gods, we are pious people, and so don't let this happen to us. We try to do the right thing, and they set off to sea. So, line 351. Amidst our course, Zacinthian woods appear, and next by rocky Neritos we steer. We fly from Ithaca's detested shore, and curse the land which dire Ulysses bore. I'll put up a map here for a second. On this map, you can see kind of the course that Aeneas has taken so far. And remember, they're looking for their destined home. So they set out from Troy. They go south a little bit towards Ida to build their ships. They go up to Thrace. That doesn't work out. They go to Delos, and they're there for a second, and they make their way to Crete. Crete, they're there for a year. That doesn't work out. Crete, by the way, would be Pergama right there. If you don't remember where Crete is, it's where the Minoans were from. They go up north now. They pass by the island of the Harpies, and now they're right there by Ithaca. So they're making their way up towards Italy now, and they're trying to get there. And, well, yeah, everywhere they stop, it's just not working out. So they're right by Ithaca, which, as you remember, is where Ulysses, was from. We fled from Ithaca's detested shore and cursed the land which dire Ulysses bore, line 355. At length Leucotes's cloudy top appears, and the sun's temple which the sailor fears. Leucotes is actually near Actium, this famous battle that Caesar Augustus fought, and where he really it was his ultimate victory, where he defeated Mark Antony. And so that's where they're at. So Virgil's audience would definitely recognize where Aeneas is at right now. Resolved to breathe a while from labor past, our crooked anchors from the prow we cast, and joyful to the little city haste. Here, safe beyond our hopes, our vows we pay to Jove, the guide and patron of our way. The customs of our country we pursue, and Trojan games on Actium shores renew. Our youth their naked limbs besmear with oil, and exercise their wrestlers' noble toil. Wrestlers is wrestlers. Pleased to have sailed so long before the wind, and left so many Grecian towns behind. The sun had now fulfilled his annual course, and Boreas on the seas displayed his force. So again, another year has passed. I fixed upon the temple's lofty door the brazen shield which vanquished Abas bore. The verse beneath my name in action speaks. These arms Aeneas took from conquering Greeks. Then I command to weigh. The seamen ply their sweeping oars. The smoking billows fly. The sight of high Phaeacia soon we lost, and skimmed along Epirus' rocky coast. Then to Chaonia's port our course we bend, and landed to Betrotus heights ascend. Here wondrous things were loudly blazed fame, how Helenus revived the Trojan name, and reigned in Greece, that Priam's captive son succeeded Epirus in his bed and throne, and fair Andromache, restored by fate, once more was happy in a Trojan mate. I leave my galleys riding in the port, and long to see the new Dardanian court. By chance the mournful queen before the gate then solemnized her former husband's fate. Green altars raised of turf with gifts she crowned, and sacred priests in order stand around, and thrice the name of hapless Hector sound. The grove itself resembles Ida's wood, and Simois seemed the well-dissembled flood. But when at nearer distance she beheld my shining armor and my Trojan shield, astonished at the sight, the vital heat forsakes her limbs. Her veins no longer beat. She faints, she falls, and scarce recovering strength. Thus with a faltering tongue she speaks at length. "Are you alive, O goddess born?" she said. "Or if a ghost, then where is Hector's shade?" At this she cast a loud and frightful cry. With broken words I made this brief reply. All of me that remains appears in sight. I live, if living be, to loathe the light. No phantom, but I drag a wretched life, my fate resembling that of Hector's wife. What have you suffered since you lost your lord? By what strange blessings are you now restored? Still are you Hector's? Or is Hector fled, and his remembrance lost in purest bed? With eyes dejected, in a lowly tone, after a modest pause, she thus begun. O only happy maid of Priam's race, whom death delivered from the foe's embrace, commanded on Achilles' tomb to die, not forced like us to hard captivity, or in a haughty master's arms to lie. In Grecian ships unhappy we were born, endured the victor's loss, sustained the scorn. Thus I submitted to the lawless pride of Pyrrhus, more a handmaid than a bride. Cloyed with possession he forsook my bed, and Helen's lovely daughter sought to wed. Then me to Trojan Helenus resigned, and his two slaves in equal marriage joined. Till young Orestes, pierced with deep despair, and longing to redeem the promise fair, before Apollo's altar slew the ravisher. By Pyrrhus' death the kingdom we regained. At least one half with Helenus remained. Our part from Chaon he Chaonia calls, and names from Pergamus his rising walls. But you, what fates have landed on our coast? What gods have sent you, or what storms have tossed? Does young Ascanius life and health enjoy, saved from the ruins of unhappy Troy? Oh, tell me how his mother's loss he bears, what hopes are promised for his blooming years, how much of Hector in his face appears. She spoke, and mixed her speech with mournful cries, and fruitless tears came trickling from her eyes. At length her lord descends upon the plain in pomp, attended with a numerous train, receives his friends, and to the city leads, and tears of joy amidst his welcome sheds. Proceeding on, another Troy I see, or in less compass Troy's epitome. A rivulet by the name of Xanthus ran, and I embraced the Scaean Kate again. My friends in porticos were entertained, and feasts and pleasures through the city reigned. The tables filled the spacious hall around, and golden bowls with sparkling wine were crowned. 2 days we passed in mirth, till friendly gales, blown from the south, supplied our swelling sails. Then to the royal seer I thus began. O thou who know'st beyond the reach of man the laws of heaven and what the stars decree, whom Phoebus taught unerring prophecy from his own tripod and his holy tree, skilled in the winged inhabitants of air, what auspices their notes and flights declare? O say, for all religious rites portend a happy voyage and a prosperous end, and every power and omen of the sky direct my course for destined Italy. But only dire Salino from the gods a dismal famine fatally forebodes. O say what dangers I am first to shun, what toils vanquish, and what course to run. The prophet first with sacrifice adores the greater gods, their pardon then implores, unbinds the fillet from his holy head. To Phoebus next my trembling steps he led, full of religious doubts and awful dread. All right, so Aeneas and the Trojans have left the land of the Harpies, and they've continued on their voyage. They go right by Ithaca, which they really hate, because boy, do they hate Ulysses in this story. And then they end up going by Leucate, which would be near Actium, and they stop there. Actium, again, would be the place where Caesar Augustus, who kind of is sponsoring the story, right? He has his great victory, and so they're celebrating a little bit there and have some relief from their toil, and they celebrate these Trojan games, so kind of imagine Olympic kind of things. They leave there and they end up on this place called Betrotus, and wouldn't you know, they run into some fellow Trojans there, some other Trojans that have escaped Troy. Now remember, several years have passed. It's not exactly evident how much time has passed when they get here, but there's been enough time for these Trojans to get here and actually settle something. And Aeneas' gang has just had a harder time because they're being prevented by Juno, especially, from making much progress. And so he comes and finds out, hey, Andromache and Helenus are in charge here. So Helenus would have been a son of Priam, and Andromache, remember, would be Hector's wife, former wife at this point. And so Andromache, Hector's former wife, comes and says, oh, is it really you? Are you Aeneas? Oh my goodness, how'd you get here? What happened? Are you dead? Are you a ghost? Am I going to see Hector's ghost now? And, you know, Aeneas has similar questions. How did you get here? What happened? I thought you went off with Pyrrhus. How did you explain, right? And so in 415, she starts talking about the only happy maid of Priam's race. In Priam's family, the only woman who had any luck is his youngest daughter, who was sacrificed at Achilles' grave before we left. She had the easiest time. The rest of us have had a hard time. It's been hard, Aeneas. I was taken by Pyrrhus, and he was cloyed with possession. He was sickened with possession, kind of got tired of me, and he forsook being my wife and kind of gave me away. He wanted Helen's lovely daughter instead. And so he goes after Helen of Troy's daughter, right? And leaves her behind, leaves her with Helenus, because Pyrrhus just uses her and then leaves her.
the Orist I remember is about Orestes and Agamemnon's son Orestes, and so Orestes actually ends up killing Pyrrhus, and so she gives us that little bit of information. But she said, yeah, once he was dead and out of the way, really, Helenus and I kind of took over this land, and we've been building up this kind of second Troy. And what about you? How's it been going with you, right? And then she just kind of bursts into tears. And so he's looking around, and Aeneas is looking around and sees this city. It's another Troy, I see, line 448 there. And man, it's just like Troy. There's even a little river that's just like the Xanthus. There's a Scaean gate. Man, there's porticos, there's feasts. It's just a wonderful city that these people have built. And what's going through his mind as he's looking at all this, right? And then before too long, Helenus himself comes, who obviously Aeneas would have known, and they embrace, and then they pass 2 days in this wonderful time. But then after a while, Aeneas really wants to know his fate. Now, Helenus is actually, he's the son of Priam, but he's also a seer. And so the royal seer is Helenus, and Aeneas is just going to ask him some questions. And Helenus, the royal seer, is going to tell Apollo's will.